These are the most painful punishments in human history.
The most painful punishments from around the world.
God. Okay. Whoa. Don't punish me. I don't want to be punished. Don't show me grimy fungus feet in the first 2 seconds. Sorry. I just had way too much caffeine earlier today. I gotta relax.
On this list, them suckers tortured half-truths out of people for over 350 years during the highly unexpected Spanish Inquisition between 1478 up until 1834. Now, when you're performing painful public persecutions for such a long time, you're gonna come up with pretty colorful ways to do it. Ways to inflict maximum pain to ensure that you extract those dubious confessions from those filthy non-Catholic heathens. So it's no wonder that history was blessed with devilish devices designed to do just that. You had the Spanish spider, the Spanish collar, the Spanish tickler, very different from the French variety, the Spanish donkey, and the star of this segment, the Spanish boot.
Oh my God. I feel like back in these days, Jeffrey Dahmer would be hailed as like the ultimate being. If he could teleport back into those days, he definitely would. And what is the tickler? He said he's not going to talk about the tickler because there's something worse, but I think being tickled to death would literally be the worst thing ever. I hate being tickled.
Originating somewhere during the Inquisition times, the Spanish boot was a very basic yet very effective interrogation tool. 4 planks of wood and a few bits of metal. You got your braces for holding the wooden splints and sharpened metal nails to make you squint. The legs of the victim would be secured in place between the 2 inner free-moving braces. The 2 outer planks are secured to each other, preventing any outward movement. Not that you would want to, because, you know, sharp nails and such. Once the victim was sat down, a large wooden wedge would be placed in between the inner planks, locking the victim's legs. And I'm sure your imagination is a few steps ahead here. The interrogator equips his iconic giant hammer and rears back, preparing to strike. Are you sure you don't want to confess your crimes? Because this pulsating sack of meat is about to treat you like one of them carnival tests of strength.
Gosh dang, he looks like me.
With one swift blow from the hammer, the wedge drives the inner boards outwards, lacerating your legs, shattering your shins, and crushing your calves.
Oh my God!
Pain is pure agony. And that was only the first strike. Additional slams from the mallet reduce your legs down to something resembling burger meat. Remember when you could walk like 30 seconds ago?
On this channel, we have been diving into some horror things. Every time I watch one, I regret it, and I tell myself never again. I'm not doing that ever again. And then I end up doing it again. I bring that up because I genuinely don't know if I can watch those videos. This one, though, I don't like that.
Me too. Now, despite the Iberian identity, there were many variations of the Spanish boot throughout history. The Scottish first dabbled in boot torture even before the Spanish, tightly binding victims' legs in saturated leather. The bindings would then be heated over an open fire, shrinking the leather and constricting the legs to the point of snapping bone. The French even got in on the action with their own version. The victim would be bound and gagged on a wooden chair with both feet placed in a single oversized iron boot. It would then be filled with either boiling water, boiling oil, or even molten lead. And if
that's not even torture, like you're just killing him at that point. Like, what are we talking about? You stand in a giant boot and they pour lava in there. I thought torture was like a lot slower. Like, I don't know, like, oh, I'm gonna give you a paper cut if you don't tell me your Roblox password, for example. Not, I'm gonna put you in a giant boot and pour lava in there. What could even be like so encrypting back then? Like, they didn't have passwords for things. They didn't have banks with giant contraptions to break in. What could you possibly be interrogating people for back then?
If you're unaware, pure lead melts at around 622 degrees Fahrenheit or 328 degrees Celsius. For comparison, just 2 seconds of exposure to 150 degree Fahrenheit water is enough to cause third-degree burns on human skin.
My gosh.
Victims of the French boot would have their skin and their muscles boiled off of their bones or encased in a big hunk of lead. Better get
I'm gonna throw up. Like, it gargles my stomach. I feel like my stomach is boiling right now. I don't know how I feel about this.
At least make up something convincing.
Abacanation. Abracadabra.
This shit sucks. You ever hear the term an eye for an eye? Well, the literal form of this would be the toe-curling, face-scrunching practice of abassination. Popular amongst ancient Greeks, Persians, and within the Byzantine Empire, abassination is a form of corporal punishment, meaning that the goal isn't death, but rather to teach the victim a lesson. In this case, how not to see anymore. That's because a bacination is the act of inflicting intentional or oftentimes irreversible damage to one's eyeballs.
Oh my god.
What the fuck? Your bulbous oculi have a myriad of...
I wonder like how normal this stuff was back then, because the only thing really that we know about history is, well, history books and what was documented back then. And maybe back then the only thing that was like well documented was their torture methods. And so maybe we think that it used to be so normal for them to do that back then.
Nerves ready to send your brain big ouch signals the moment they detect discomfort. And boy, are they about to feel some discomfort. Although it was mainly used as a punishment for heresy or treason, the act of annihilating one's eyes existed all across human history. Perhaps one of the most popular examples of this was executed by Byzantine Emperor Basil II. After defeating the Bulgarians at the Battle of Cladion, Big Bad Basil had taken thousands of enemy soldiers hostage. He had ordered that the men be divided into groups of 100 and brought before him. It was then he had his men gouge out the eyes of 99 of the soldiers, sparing one who would be allowed to keep one eye. That lucky duck.
You guys see what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that would never happen today. There's no way. There's no way. I mean, maybe I just don't hear about it. Maybe it does happen and I'm just very oblivious and ignorant. I've never heard of like the US. Like, don't get me wrong. We've done our fair share of bad things, but I've never heard of us taking 100 people and gouging their eyeballs out. Like, what are we talking about? That is insane. That's absurd. Maybe in like some like Game of Thrones type movie that's happened. But if this is real, like if this actually happened, that's horrifying. That is horrifying.
Be the one to lead his now blinded comrades back to their respective commanders. Now, according to legend, this mass blinding was conducted on 15,000 men, granting Basil II the vicious title of Basil the Bulgar Slayer. But how would this blinding actually be performed? Well, it's really up to how the person doing it felt that day. Traditionally, a bacination was carried out by jamming a red-hot iron rod into the ocular cavity, essentially melting the eye from the skull. Other flavors of removal included scooping with a spoon-like device, slitting with a blade, using preposterous pressure to pop them like pimples, or just leaving it up to good old chemistry. Now, if you really pissed someone off, you would be strapped to a chair while corrosive liquid, usually boiling vinegar, was placed in soluble cups and positioned over your eyes. The corrosive agents would slowly eat away at the bottom of the cups, left to drip into your eyeballs, which would painfully dissolve away. At that point, you'd be luckier to die than to survive. But couldn't they just close their eyelids? Oh, you mean these? Yeah, they cut those off too.
As I was watching this, I was thinking of other ways to shut off some of your senses, because obviously sight is one of your 6 senses, 5 senses. Anyway, I was thinking, what do you guys think of this one? You put cement in someone's nostrils and then you clog them up, so then they can't breathe out of their nose anymore, forcing them to breathe out of their mouth. I hate breathing out of my mouth. I find it, quite frankly, disgusting.
Don't worry, it was only a little painful. See what I did there? No, you didn't. That's fine.
Next up, the tiger bench.
Strap in for this one, because that's exactly what's about to go down, and your legs are about to go up.
Oh, God.
This is the tiger bench, a Chinese torture device popularly used in China from the Imperial Age up through today. That's right, the International Society for Human Rights, a German-based non-governmental non-profit organization, claims that multiple inhumane torture devices like the tiger bench are still used on prisoners in China to this day for
everything I said, bag it up, tie a knot, zip tie the knot, put a lock on the zip tie of the knot, wind it up, and throw it out the window. I never look back on it ever, because apparently some of this stuff still happens today. What are we talking about?
Acting confessions or flat-out torture just because. It's true, probably. And the same applied to its use in the Imperial Age. During the times of the Ming and Qing dynasties between the 14th and 20th centuries, the judicial system required a confession to legally convict a criminal for their crimes, since forensics at the time weren't all that great. Unless you had notable status to sway public opinion, the perpetrator would basically have to be caught red-handed by multiple witnesses. He ran into my knife.
That actually is a point that I was going to bring up earlier, is maybe torturing was way more necessary back in the day because there was way less evidence. They didn't have cameras, they didn't have audio recordings, and so in order to actually get to the truth of things, they had to be very forceful about it. I'm not saying that's right, but I am just saying that's probably a reason why torturing used to be so much bigger. Because today, for example, let's say somebody goes into a Walmart and steals something. You don't have to take a knife to his eyeball to figure out what he stole or if he stole it. You can just go to the security tapes and say, oh yeah, the big, giant, balding, red, strong, 6'4", handsome man is stealing the Oreos in aisle 5. Clear as day. He shoved it inside of his butt cheeks and walked out of the store. Whether or not that's a true story, I will not disclose. But point being, the proof is in the pudding. The proof is right there.
But what do Tiger Bench do, you ask in poor English? It's very simple. The victim is delicately slammed onto a wooden bench in a sitting position, their hands and ankles bound by ropes, and their mouths gagged with, I don't know, probably a piece of cloth or something. They would also have their torso and thighs secured to the bench to prevent any unwanted thrashing from the pain that they're about to experience. One by one, bricks or wooden slabs would be placed under the victim's piggies, slowly elevating them higher and higher while the rest of their body remained locked in place. Now, unless you have the Tibio Taylor talent of a turkey, you can see where this is going. With each addition of a brick, your ligaments in your knees become hyperextended.
Yeah, what are your knees snap?
Forcing your knee joint beyond its natural range of motion.
Oh!
If any of you less than limber people remember the ungodly sit and reach box from your middle school gym class, just imagine that, but someone grabbing your arms and pulling you with all of their might. Then you might just get a lick of what that pain must feel like. The continuous hyperextension eventually leads to the shattering of the kneecaps and the splintering of the leg bones, utterly destroying muscles and tendons, rendering the victim's legs completely useless. Trust me, although this guy seems untroubled, inside, he's screaming. And if that weren't enough, prisoners would be bound in this position for days on end, to the brink of starvation and full sleep deprivation from the ongoing pain. Not only from the hyperextension, but from physical beatings to the rest of their body if they continued to refuse to confess.
Like, that's not enough? You snapped his knees in half, making him completely immobilized for the rest of his life, and now you're still whipping him with the belt? Come on, tell me the secret formula! Tell me the secret formula! Seriously, like, what could have been that important back then? Oh my god. And this technique is still used today? China! Oh my god, what are we doing over there? Good lord. Sagittal sawing.
Despite with the chill demeanors on the...
How did I get here? How did every single decision I've made in my life lead me to this moment here where I'm staring at a man naked, butt cheeks out, legs spread, tied up to a pole, upside down, getting sawed in half? What decision did I make that led me here? And how do I go back in time and undo that? That's what I would do. If I could go back to one moment in time, it would be to that decision and change it. Instead of going left, I'll go right so that I don't end up looking at this man.
As faces express, getting sawn vertically in half is not a pleasant experience. Although the act of sawing has been present throughout many different cultures in history, ancient Roman and Chinese versions were mainly done transversely or at the waist. But some sadistic buttholes thought, nah, not painful enough. Let's try a different axis. And you know what? Let's hang them upside down too. We'll start shredding the sack, split the crack, go down the hull and to the skull. The method is pretty self-explanatory. A victim will be hoisted up upside down with arms and legs secured to two posts, usually with their dangly bits out.
I'm so sorry.
The condemned would then have a big ol' saw ripped through their bodies like a slice of birthday cake. On the bright side, the poor soul would most likely be long dead or at the very least unconscious before the saw ever got that far thanks to the excruciating pain and severe blood loss. Documented cases of this particular path of punishment are rare, but some stories have survived. The most known case being that of Simon the Zealot, one of the 12 apostles of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. If you've ever seen Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, he's the less detailed guy all the way at the end of the table getting ridiculed by these two fine gents for asking, "When can we eat?" Very little is known about poor Simon at all, being only passively mentioned in the Bible. History states that he preached across Egypt and Persia, with the latter being the place of his demise. Apparently, the Persians weren't too happy with the door-to-door preachings of Simon, so much so that they saw to his end.
My God.
Literally. According to some historians, around the year 65 AD, at the age of 60, Simon was spread in two while spreading the word of the Lord. For his dedication to the J-Man, Simon was made a saint in the Catholic Church, with many depictions of him holding a long saw, similar to the one that ripped through his being. Ironically enough,
Why is he known as the Saw Man now? I mean, I get it. He was Sawed in two, but that's like Steve Irwin. The GOAT, by the way. I love Steve Irwin. That'd be like making a statue of him riding a stingray. How is that not so disrespectful? And that's how this guy's known. Like, Steve Irwin is known as the crocodile guy. But that'd be like every image and statue and piece of art that was dedicated to Steve Irwin. He had like a stingray under his arm, and they were buddy old pals. No, that's what got him killed. Oh god, the ants. What even is this
oftentimes we find that nature is already well equipped with possible torture resources, and it doesn't even have to be something large or intimidating. Sometimes it's the small things that pack the biggest punch.
Okay.
Well, turns out that quite a few groups of people around the world took advantage of nature's blessings. Like this little guy. This is a Pseudomyrmex triplerinus, but you can call it a little ouch. This agonizing arthropod is a venomous species of ant most commonly found in the northern areas of South America. These ants contain a cytotoxic venom, which if you remember my little toxins rhyme from my worst jobs in history video, you'd know that cytotoxins cause extreme cellular damage and painful swelling, making it a perfect tool for devastating torture. For this section, we actually have a very modern use case. Back in 2014, a group of Bolivian villagers in the province of Ayopaya apprehended a pair of teenagers accused of stealing several motorcycles. Since the run-of-the-mill judicial penal system wasn't deemed effective enough, the villagers took matters into their own hands.
Oh my god.
The two upstanding criminals, aged 18 and 19, were strapped to a tree infested with venomous ants for 3 days. The young men writhed in pain for hours and hours on end, sustaining bites all over their bodies from head to toe. Chests were chomped, calves were crunched, nipples were nipped, and balls were bitten. It was only after being found by one of their sisters that the young men were freed from their pincer prison. Well, also after all of their relatives coughed up about $3,700 in cash as compensation for the bikes that were stolen. Gotta pay back your debt after all. Both men were rushed to intensive care, with one requiring dialysis to survive. But I bet they learned a valuable lesson. Don't take shit that doesn't belong to you.
See, that's an awful torture method, but it's one that I can back at least more than the others, because maybe he didn't go into it yet, but it seems as though there's no permanent damage. Like the ones where you turn your legs into a meat grinder. Nope. That's a no-no for me. The one where you jump into a giant boot and they pour lava in it, that's a no-no. No, 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 no. The one where they take a flaming hot knife and stab your eyeballs out? No. And don't even get me started on the saw. This one at least seems like you can survive and continue living life afterwards. You just learn a very harsh lesson.
There have been other claims of ant torture throughout history, though, as a warning, these are more anecdotal than confirmed. It is said that the Apache people of the southern US and northern Mexico regions were capable of committing horrible acts of violence, but hey, when you're forced off your land, what are you gonna do? One such act was taking prisoners of war and burying them neck deep in the earth, allegedly near anthills containing red harvester ants.
Ooh, not
With
red
a simple
ants.
prod
Oh,
to the
God.
hill, thousands of ants pour out to defend their home. And being the nearest target, looks like you're the culprit. The red harvester ant latches onto your skin with its strong Chad-like mandibles
This hurts
and
bad.
proceeds to repeatedly stab you with its stinger. Once stung, pheromones are released, chemically signaling other ants to swarm you. Your lips, your mouth, your ears, and even your eyes are all susceptible to the stings. The intense pain from just a single sting has been described as feeling like being prodded by a searing hot needle, lasting up to 8 hours. So it goes without saying that thousands of those would really suck. But don't worry, it's well documented that around 500 stings would be enough to kill a human.
Wow.
You're probably getting all itchy just thinking about them things crawling all over you, aren't you? Well, now you are.
The trials.
Our last stop on this journey takes place in the big old continent of Africa. Having dealt with colonization for centuries, the many countries of Africa are no stranger to pain. In fact, they're pretty good at dishing it out, especially to each other. Now, the concept of trial by ordeal is not exclusive to Africa. It's been seen across Europe, Persia, India, and Cambodia as well, but this segment focuses on Africa. Why? Because that's how I wrote the script and that's how I'm editing this video, so... Okay, so the idea behind the trial by ordeal is to determine the guilt or innocence of the accused through various means of torture. If you survive, you're innocent. If you die, you're guilty. Not that it mattered anymore, but there were many different ordeals to be trialed through. These are gonna be a bit rapid fire, so stick with me. Speaking of which, the first one is the trial by fire. The accused would either be forced to walk along a length of hot coals, hold scalding hot metal, or retrieve items from cauldrons of boiling hot oil. If the victim showed no visible signs of injury, they would be considered innocent. But that's just setting people up for failure. These examples of trial by fire have been historically documented across Togo, Nigeria, and Sudan. Next was the self-explanatory trial by poison. The accused would drink toxic concoctions consisting of various local poisons. In Liberia and Ghana, victims enduring the trial would be forced to ingest the bark of the sassywood tree. Alright, which one of you drank all the sassywood juice? I don't want to drink that stuff. Nope. Was it you? The bark of the sassywood tree contains erythrofleine, a powerful poison that can fuck up your heart. But as long as you regurgitate that slop out of your system, you're right as rain, and considered innocent. Similarly, some prisoners in Sierra Leone or Nigeria would drink a solution made from the calabar bean, which contains physostigmine, an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. If you've never seen my chemical weapons video, this is just a fancy way of saying that it causes life-threatening seizures and a loss of your respiratory control.
It is pretty hilarious that back in the day, like I said earlier, they didn't have proof of who was guilty and who was innocent. So if there were two people or multiple people involved in a certain incident, they would just give all of them poison, and then whoever survived apparently was the innocent one. They just left it up to the gods to decide who was innocent and who was guilty.
One final trial would be the trial by water. Popular in pre-colonial Côte d'Ivoire, the accused would have their hands and feet bound and be tossed in the local river. Those who were able to break free of their bindings and swim to the surface were absolved of their crimes, while those who sank like stones were doomed to figuratively and literally drown in their guilt. Talk about washing away your sins.
The rat dungeon.
Yeah, okay, no, my dad never rat dungeoned me. And to be clear, I love my dad. I don't want to say that and then make it seem like my dad stinks or anything. I actually love my dad a lot. I hope he watches this. Please don't hurt me. I'm just kidding. No, rat dungeon, that looked awful.
If you were alive in London, England during the medieval period, you would have definitely heard about the rat dungeon, since this punishment struck paralyzing fear into the hearts of even the most hardened criminals. This was a cell that was located at the bottom of the London Tower, where prisoners were shackled and chained in complete darkness. But here's the thing, the dungeon was connected to the nearby river and just below the river's waterline, so that when the water levels rose, all the rats that lived along the riverbed would be pushed out of their shelters and forced to swim downstream. This would of course lead the hungry and angry rats towards the entrance of the dungeon, where they would then come face to face with the prisoner. But to the unlucky prisoner, he never actually saw anything, and all he would hear were the soft scurries of the rat's feet entering the dungeon.
This is the first one. Apparently it only gets worse. That's actually a nightmare. First of all, being isolated at all, that makes you go psychotic if you don't have any social interaction ever. Number one. Number two, complete in pitch darkness always. You're mentally insane. And number three, you get eaten alive by rats.
And in a matter of minutes, these soft noises were in the hundreds and all around him. These angry and aggressive rats would then begin to take small bites from the prisoner, who had no way of defending himself. Now, he might be able to shake the rats off for a few hours, but eventually the prisoner would pass out from pure exhaustion.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is like, you could probably curl up in a ball and just start rolling around, and then you'd probably end up squishing a lot of them too. But yeah, I mean, if they're eating you for hours at a time, eventually, like, there's nothing you can do and you just give up. That's terrible.
And while he slept, the rats would continue to take bites from his flesh. Eventually, when he would wake up, he would discover hundreds of bites throughout his entire body. But it didn't stop there. The prisoner was left here for days or weeks on end, depending on his crime. But towards the end of the medieval period, this form of punishment just got more and more deranged, eventually becoming a form of execution, where prisoners would just be thrown in the dungeon and forgotten about.
I almost don't even want to believe that. I really don't. Like, it's one thing to watch like a stick animation of that happening, but then like actually thinking about how that's like a human being. That was a human person, like me and you, human people. I'm assuming that happened to a lot of people. I don't know, tens, hundreds, thousands maybe. That's how people die? That's insane. That's actually crazy.
The rack. This was yet another punishment that took place in the London Tower.
Okay, what is going on with London, bro? Relax. What is wrong with you? No wonder you had half your population break up and boat across the world into the unknown to hopefully find land, which they did. God bless America. But now it's all started. I was always wondering, like, why would we do that? Why is that happening? Now I get it. Because this shenanigans was happening. I mean, what is this?
Was a torture device that was used in many places throughout history. This form of punishment was originally designed for getting a confession, usually from criminals, slaves, or prisoners of war. The device looked like a large ladder, but instead of secure steps, they would actually rotate like a rolling pin. You see, when a prisoner was placed on the rack, he would have his feet and wrists tied to a ratchet pulley system, where two legal officials would slowly tighten the ropes and locking them in place, placing an increasing amount of strain on the prisoner's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows with every single turn.
If I was put in that situation, I don't care. I don't care who I'm giving up. I'm telling them everything. You don't even have to crank it at all. Just show me that. But like, strap me down, tie me down. That's all I need. I'm telling you everything. This is awful.
This was all done to get information, but of course, a lot of the times the truth was not accepted as reality, and the prisoner would then begin to say whatever he believed the officials wanted to hear. Sometimes it would work and the prisoners would be let go, while other times they would be tortured even more for lying. When the whole ordeal was over, prisoners were usually released with dislocated joints, but oftentimes they were left completely paralyzed. That was the case in England in 1447 when a 25-year-old girl named Anne Askew would be tortured on the rack for hours and hours on end and left completely paralyzed after all her joints were dislocated. She was then carried on a chair and burned alive at the...
What did she do? Like, what could you possibly have done to deserve that? She probably just, like, stole a loaf of bread. And back then, it was, like, punishable by torture and death. I hope that, like, torture isn't that much of a thing anymore. I mean, I guess in some case of war, it has to happen. But at least in Stranger Things, apparently there's a serum out there that you can inject into people and they just tell you the truth. I don't know if that's used or if it's even real at all, but in Stranger Things, it was a thing. That seems like a good solution to me rather than torturing people to death.
All this because she read and memorized scriptures from the Bible, which she preached in private to a small group of women.
Well, there's the answer. There's the answer. Yeah, I would say that's, you know, the medieval ages, absolutely, what an insane time to live. What a crazy time to be alive. Wow. I am so blessed and thankful to be living in the time that I am and to be in America. I think in some places in the world it still is really, like, bad like that. Wow, I am very lucky.
Were the exact women she refused to name and expose during her torture. You see, during this time period, if you followed any religion other than the Catholic Church, you better not say a word to anybody, including your own husband.
Wow.
Which was the person that turned her in.
No, I mean, what are we doing? I feel like he should be put in jail. Why did you marry her if you knew, like, that she wasn't even practicing your own religion, if it was that deep? Or maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't know, and like a couple years into their marriage, she was like, oh, sweetie, I have something to tell you. I actually, I'm not Catholic. And then he was like, actually, you're gonna die now. I'm gonna report you to the authorities, and they're gonna torture you in the worst way possible, then burn you alive. Holy crap.
Number 8. Keel hauling. This brutal punishment was carried out at sea on sailors who would steal or be violent towards others and would usually result in death. Keel hauling would start with a sailor having his arms tied with a rope, then looped around the entire circumference of the ship before being tied off to his feet. The sailor would then be thrown overboard while the group of men on board pulled on the rope to slowly drag him around the outside of the ship, including over the keel, which is how this punishment gets its name. But a lot of the times, the sailor wouldn't even have to worry about it, since they were dead before they ever reached it. Kinda just depends on how hard the guys on the rope feel like working that day.
They're doing so much extra. Like, that's so much work to kill the guy. When you could easily just throw him overboard. Or like, you know, they had swords and stuff back then, just kaplow him.
Not only would the sailors be drowning and getting their backs and necks broken on the keel, they were also getting sliced apart like a cheese grater by all the sharp barnacles on the outside of the ship. But if by some miracle, a sailor actually happens to make it all the way around the ship without dying,
they're free. Surely they're free. Surely they're free for actually surviving.
3 things will happen. 1, he would be sent for round 2 and for sure be dead by then. 2. Be freed and allowed back on the ship,
See, that's what I like. That's good. I appreciate that one.
where he would then slowly die to infections. Or 3. Live the rest of his life single and being made fun of, since he was now fully covered in scars from head to toe.
Some girls are into that, though. Anyway, number 7.
7. Crushed by elephants. Now we are getting to the part of the list where living is no longer an option. This form of punishment has been used by many countries throughout history, but was most recently used by India in the 19th century, which is really not that long ago if you really think about it. Like, your great-grandma could have witnessed one of these. What type of crimes would you have to commit to be crushed by an elephant, you might ask? Well, apparently if you failed to pay your taxes.
No comment.
That was good enough. And of course, stealing or being an enemy soldier was also a great way to become a tortilla. But the most disturbing case in history was when the 4th Mughal Emperor of India ordered an enormous amount of criminals to be crushed to death in a single day, simply because he was bored and needed some entertainment.
Dude, I literally said that. I literally said that on the last one. They're so bored back. They got nothing to do. They don't have phones. They don't have computers. They don't have iPads. They're bored out of their mind.
Forgot to pay his taxes, crushed. The man who stole an apple from the local market, crushed. The little orphan who jaywalked across the street, crushed. The man who murdered his neighbor and added his remains to a large pot of tomato soup, then fed that soup to his family and watched them eat it from the shadows with a creepy smirk on his face. He's alright. Apparently he makes a damn good soup.
Okay.
There are a few ways that this public execution goes down, but one thing always stays the same. There's always a guy on top of the elephant controlling its every move. And this was very intentional, as this was meant to showcase just how amazing the ruling class were. I mean, look at them. They can control an elephant. Now be impressed. The first method of execution was the one that you better pray for if this was going to be your fate. Here, the criminals would have their arms tied behind their back and their heads placed on a pedestal, where it was then crushed like a grape by the elephant's foot. Now, the second method is much more cruel. The criminal would be placed flat on the floor with their arms tied behind their backs. Then the elephants would be guided to walk over the person's body, and hopefully the criminal would die on the first go.
The thing is, too, is like elephants are really smart and they're very empathetic towards at least other elephants. And like they have a big like home or like family order. If an elephant dies in the elephant pack or herd or whatever, I'm pretty sure they have like an actual funeral for that elephant. I don't mean like they get in like suits and ties and everything, but like they mourn their dead. So my point is like these elephants are not dumb. They know what they're doing and they're pretty much enslaved into killing humans, which they probably don't want to do. They probably don't want to do that. A lot of elephants are nice, but I'm sure that if they don't do it, then they get tortured themselves. So they're I feel bad for the elephant too.
But sometimes they just end up crushing a leg or an arm, so the elephant then has to make a U-turn and try again and again and again.
Oh my God.
The final and worst way is when a highly trained elephant was guided to slowly crush the person limb by limb. They would first crush the arms, then the legs, and then poke holes in them with the tusk, until eventually dealing the final blow to the head or torso.
That's just awful.
This is the more theatrical route that rulers like the 4th Mughal love to take, and made for a truly traumatizing experience for everyone, except for the 4th Mughal.
Oh, wait, so like he would bring a lot of people out to watch too? Would it be like the whole town would come out, or the whole city, or the whole whatever would come and watch this happen? Or, like, do they have to go? I know like the Romans or whatever had like the Colosseum. They would watch like the prisoners fight in there, but they would love it. Like they was a big deal. I don't know if these people are enjoying watching the elephants crush people.
Number 6.
Well, he did.
Impalement. Probably one of the
that sounds fun.
the grossest and most cruel forms of punishment on the list. This has been used by a few countries throughout history, but was most recently used in Egypt in the 17th century, usually against criminals that were highway robbers, grave thieves, or anyone who would try and start a rebellion. This punishment would start by having a criminal lay flat on their stomachs with their arms tied behind their back. They would then be sliced open with a razor to increase the size of their back door. And as soon as that incision was made, the cut would be lathered with paste to instantly stop the blood. They would then thrust in a long wooden stake that was the width of a man's arm.
Why is he making that face though? You know what I'm saying? Like why is he making that face? He's kind of enjoying that.
Sharply tapered on one end. They then begin to hit the wooden stake with the mallet,
He changed faces into what seems to be even more enjoyment, you could argue.
pushing it further and further in. And of course, the steak was greased up beforehand to make this process a lot smoother. And once the steak has popped out of the criminal's shoulder, head, or mouth, they were pretty much long gone. He is then planted next to a busy road, like a Halloween decoration, to remind everyone that this is what happens when you break the law. They will be left there for the entire day and removed the following morning before the body begins to stink. But wait, there's another version of this as well. You see, on some occasions, the criminals would only be impaled just deep enough to keep them in place, but not too deep that it would cause immediate death. They would do this by having stakes that had a seated position on them to prevent the person from sliding down any further. They would then be placed on a busy road where they would suffer for hours and hours, pleading to people walking by for help, until eventually succumbing to their wounds.
Normally I like having fun. When I do reaction videos, I like to have fun. I don't know how I can have fun. I mean, this is awful. That's insane. It makes me sad.
Number 5. Poena culae. Poena culae is Latin for penalty of the sack. And that's exactly what it was, just a lot more terrifying and cruel. This was an exclusive punishment for anyone that would murder their own family members. This was first seen in the 2nd century in Rome, but would later be used by the Germans in the 18th century. This all begins with a convicted murderer being placed inside a thick leather bag. But just to make sure the man isn't lonely, they would then add a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. I don't know what these animals did to deserve this, but hey, at least the evil family murderer doesn't die alone. Once all the animals are added inside the bag, it is then sewn shut, creating an almost airtight seal. Now you would think this would be horrible enough, but no, this is just the beginning. Because as soon as the bag is sewn shut, it is then tossed into the ocean. But don't worry, later on, these murderers would be given the option to either be placed inside the leather bag or be sent to perform at the Colosseum, where they can perform the act of being mauled to death in front of all of their loved ones and peers.
I think I'd pick that one, honestly. Because I guess you'd, like, maybe kind of a little tiny bit have a chance at survival. The other one, I mean, you're just dead. There's nothing you can do. Wow.
You know, at least they had the option. Number 4, rats. This is one of
Oh, I know this one. Oh, jeez, this one's terrible.
the most sick punishments in all of human history, and it involves the use of rats. I will cover 2 of them here as they are very similar. The first use of this form of punishment dates back to 1568 during the 80 Years' War. A Dutch leader named Diederik Sonoy would often use this method of punishment, which involved placing a rat inside of a clay bowl, then placing it topside down on a prisoner's stomach,
And then
chest,
they burn it.
face, or groin.
Why did he make that face when he put it on the groin, though? But yeah, they put fire on the back of it, and it makes the rat, like, freak out because it gets hot in there. And then, well, you'll see. I mean, oh no.
Of the bowl would be heated with either a torch or some coals, causing the rat to go into a full-on panic, trying to escape from the heat. And its only way out was to burrow into the human. Once inside, it would continue to chew and tear apart whatever was in
my
its
God,
way,
bro.
desperately searching for a way out. Eventually, the rat finds its way out of the maze and survives. The same could not be said for the prisoner. But the second method was much, much worse.
Oh, I don't know the
and
other
was
one.
highly secretive, since it was used under the guidance of the dictator Augusto Pinochet, where he held power from 1976 through 1983.
That guy just looks evil. Like, if you show me a picture of, like, that picture, and you ask me, good or bad, what do you think? That's awful. Terrible person.
They called it the rectoscope.
Okay.
And I'm sure you have already figured out where this is going. Yes, it's exactly what you think. They would place a tube on a prisoner's back door, then insert a rat inside of the tube. The rat would then begin to burrow its way in. These people were so sick that they actually expected the prisoners to answer questions while this was going on. Eventually, the rat would find its way in and begin to move forward to find its way out. Nobody really knows how many people died from this punishment, but we do know that a ton of people went missing when this dictator was in charge.
I don't, like, the people are the sickest of minds back then. That's what a weird thing to think of. And for it to get approved, too. Like, I'm sure, like, there had to be some sort of torture committee of people who were like, okay, yeah, let's do that, or like, oh, let's try that, or, you know? And some weirdo came up with the idea, oh, what do you guys think we stick a pipe into someone's bunghole, and then we shove a rat down the pipe and have him dig his way, and then the rest of the committee is like, that's good. That's good stuff. Let's do it. Me first. What?
3. Gibbeting. The last known use was in the early 1900s in Afghanistan. This all came to light in 1921 when the National Geographic published this image in their magazine. This was also used in the United States from time to time during the 17th and 18th century. One notable example was in Boston, Massachusetts, where a few pirates were hung at the Boston Harbor, which served as a warning to any sailors that were approaching Boston. Now let's talk about England, since they love this form of punishment so much.
Of course I do. Of course I do. I didn't know this really, but apparently the English were like actual psychos back then.
In England, this was used on traitors, murderers, pirates, and thieves. But after the year 1752, the Murder Act was passed, which required that all convicted murderers must be put to death by being publicly dissected or by gibbeting of some sort.
Skibbeting? What did he say? Skibbeting?
Must be put to death by being publicly dissected or by gibbeting of some sort. And over 134 confirmed people met this fate. The most common form of gibbeting were actually cages, and they looked like this. It was an all-steel cage that was shaped tightly to the form of a human body, which was so tight that it would not allow the person inside to move. They were then hung 30 feet or more off the floor, usually on a public road or water hole, to ensure that the most amount of people could witness this monstrosity. But I can only assume this was more annoying than anything, since every time you get thirsty and needed to fill up your container of water, you would have to deal with the dying man begging you for a sip.
Over here!
But the annoyance and torture of the public didn't stop there, because after the criminals would die in the cages, the body would be left inside to rot for years and years on end, with the locals complaining that the smell of death was so pungent that they couldn't even sleep at night. There's even been reports that some human remains stayed inside of these cages for over 20 years, before a government official would finally remember to clean it out.
Are these methods like done now? Like I don't hear of these happening ever, even in more like third world countries. Does that happen? It'd be weird if like, cause this happened for thousands and thousands of years for almost all of, I guess all of humanity really. These public torturing stuff happening. And I don't know of them ever happening in my lifetime at least. So it's weird that like it was a thing for so long and now it's no longer a thing. I guess that's good. I mean, well, it's definitely good, but humanity has made strides in the correct direction. Nice, go us.
Scaphism. This was a form of punishment that was used by the ancient Persian Empire on anyone that would be convicted of murder. First, the criminal would be placed inside of a boat on their backs and tied down. The boat had 4 holes cut out so that the person's arms and legs would be outside of the boat and in the water. They were then force-fed large quantities of honey and milk until their stomachs were visibly full. They would then proceed to lather their entire body with the milk and honey as well. After all these steps were completed, he was then pushed out to the middle of the lake where he was completely exposed to the heat of the sun. But the sun would soon become the least of his worries. You see, the reason they fed him milk and honey was not because it was a great last meal, but because this combination causes the person to get extreme diarrhea, which mixed with the sweet honey attracts rodents, bugs, wasps, bees, flies, and whatever other animals live near the lake. After being tormented by the animals throughout the entire night, you would think that the daytime maybe gets a little better. No, because as soon as the sun rises the following day, the person inside of the boat gets another gigantic meal of milk and honey and an additional lathering.
Like, why not let him go after? Like, that's his punishment, and now, all right, buddy, you're good to go. You just got tortured for 15 hours straight. All right, good. No, actually, let's run it all back. Let's do it all again. This is ridiculous.
It would be done on a daily basis to prolong the punishment for as long as possible. It was also well documented that the rodents would continuously attempt to burrow inside of the person through their back door.
Oh my God.
They were probably trying to get a head start on their next meal. A writer named John Sonaris wrote in great detail about one of these incidents. He would go on to say that it was one of the most horrid and cruel forms of punishment, since it was terribly long and seemed to have no end in sight.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people die from like starvation or dehydration in these forms of punishment, but here, obviously, they're eating more than enough, they're drinking way more than enough, so the only way that they'll die is just by bleeding out or damage from these insects, which could take days, weeks even? Maybe even a month. I don't know.
About a man who survived for an entire 17 days before he finally died from his wounds. Apparently, the man spent
Ridiculous.
his last few days with his entire face completely covered with wasps, and his
my
flesh
God.
rotting away, filled with swarms of parasites and worms,
I can't
all
even
while
look.
being covered in his own filth.
How does it possibly get worse than that? No, I mean really. Like, what are we doing here?
The oubliette. Oubliette simply means to forget in French. This was a punishment that was used in many places throughout history, including in the London Tower.
You don't say. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if the devil himself lived inside of that tower. This is insane.
Which had a small and confined room called Little Ease. Not only was this room pitch black, it was also so small that prisoners could not sit, stand, or lay down while inside it, and they would be left in this uncomfortable position for days on end. One of the most famous oubliettes is not the one in the London Tower, but in the neighboring district of Warwick, inside of Warwick Castle. Here, deep underground in the castle's dungeons, is a very small and narrow cell, completely made of stone, which has a metal door to close it shut. Prisoners were tossed inside of the cell and forgotten about, as the name implies. The prisoner would just have to sit there and wait for their inevitable death, which usually came in a few days from dehydration or starvation. Now, of course, this would be the best case scenario, because in reality, most of the time there would already be a rotting corpse inside of the cell to keep the new prisoner company. The previous occupier of the cell would serve as a daily reminder of his upcoming fate. But that's not the only companions that he will have, since the underground dungeons are completely infested with rats that have developed a taste for human flesh. But wait, there's more. These oubliettes existed in many of the castles throughout Europe, and in recent times they have actually discovered these dungeons with dozens, if not hundreds, of human remains inside of it, as proof that they were hardly ever cleaned. Like in Leap Castle of Ireland, where in 1900, during the castle's renovation, a worker found a small opening behind a wall inside of the chapel. This hole had an 8-foot drop that led to a large oubliette, and what the worker found inside shocked him, since it was filled with so many skeletons that they needed multiple cartloads to clear it all out. But just when you think this section is over, it just keeps on giving. You see, there's been many stories of men who have been placed inside one of these dungeons and kept alive for years and years on end, surviving off crumbs of food and minimal amounts of water, prolonging their inevitable demise for as long as humanly possible.
How awful. I mean, that's just insane. That's ridiculous. Wow.
Yakuza finger removal, also known as Yubitsum. It's a ritual done to gain forgiveness after a member committed an offense to someone else in his group, and it consists of amputating portions of one's own little finger to show sincere apology and remorse to the other. I've put this one as the least painful because it doesn't usually cause lifelong lasting pain, and it isn't deadly, unlike the brutal ones further down the list. Bastinado. Bastinado consists of beating the victim with a light rod, knotted cord.
Hang on a minute. This don't sound that bad. They should add a Twizzler into the mix. Me and my brothers growing up used to have Twizzler fights where we would whip each other with Twizzlers. Oh my God, that hurts so bad.
Exclusively on the feet. Unlike most types of flogging, it is meant more to be painful than to cause actual injury. Even though if done too harshly or for too long, it might cause the victim to not be able to walk anymore. This one is also not deadly. Pitch capping. Pitch capping involves pouring hot pitch or tar into a conical paper cap and forcing it onto the victim's head. The pitch was allowed to cool, and the cap was ripped off.
Oh man, that just like gave me the chills just thinking. I was enjoying this video. I'm not enjoying this video anymore. That's the worst one. It's not even close, dude. Do you die? Does it like rip it off to the skull? How much rippage are we talking here?
Scarring him for life. It wasn't usually done with the intention of killing, but deadly infections after this weren't that uncommon. Elephant's foot.
That makes sense.
This punishment, also known as gunga rao, was mostly used in Asia, specifically India, and it consisted of killing the victim by crushing him with an elephant. There were two variations of this. If the victim was lucky, his head would be placed on a pedestal, and the elephant would crush it, instantly killing
that sounds
him.
good.
This wasn't that painful because the victim would die instantly, but the second variation wasn't as forgiving. Some royal members wanted to sit down and enjoy a long show, so they ordered the elephant riders to train the elephants to walk over non-vital parts first, such as the legs and arms. The person would get crushed over and over before the elephant actually walked over over his head and killed him.
I kind of feel bad for the elephant because elephants are really smart and they probably don't want to do that, but because they're captive, if they don't do it, they're gonna get punished. So like, I think elephants generally are pretty nice. They probably don't want to be killing people. I also obviously feel bad for the people too. That sucks. Probably say that too. Next, we have the Poenaculi.
In ancient Rome, those who would kill their own father were subjected to Poenaculi. It was a death penalty.
I don't know what Poenaculi is, but I agree with whatever it is because you should never kill your father. That's insane.
Consisted of being sewn up in a leather sack with a mix of live animals, including a dog, snake, monkey, and a chicken, and then being thrown into water.
But like, what if your father, you know, was a bad guy? Like, what if he maybe touched you or something? I'm just saying, like, then do you then deserve pina colada? I'm gonna say no, because that's pretty bad. The thing too is like, I'm making jokes about this stuff. It's not funny. It's really not funny.
When military units or a large group were guilty of capital offenses, such as cowardice, mutiny, or desertion, they went through the process of decimation.
You're
a
coward!
cohort of roughly 480
That's insane.
soldiers that needed to be punished was divided into groups of 10, and each group drew lots randomly. The soldier who picked the shortest straw had to be killed by his 9 friends, often by stoning, clubbing, or stabbing, while the 9 surviving ones had to stay outside the fortified security of the camp for some time. Since the killed victim was chosen randomly, all soldiers in the group were potentially liable for execution, regardless of how guilty they were.
Oh, dude. See, that's one of those things that I was kind of just saying, like, we don't actually know if that's really what happened. That is more recent than some of the, whatever. This is awful.
Blowing from a gun is a method of execution in which the victim is typically tied to the mouth of a cannon, which is then fired, resulting in instant death.
This is what I think a child came up with, because that's an idea that I would have had if I was like 7 years old, but I would also want to see that if I was today old too.
Emperor Basil II reportedly captured 15,000 Bulgarians during the Battle of Klyden, so he decided to use them as a message to their homeland. He divided the prisoners into groups of 100, and then he had 99 out of every 100 blinded, with the 100th man being blinded in only one eye, so that he could still lead the other 99 back home. Bulgarian Tsar Samuel died of a heart attack on October 6, 1014, reportedly due to seeing his soldiers blinded.
Dude, what's so crazy is like, we're all people at the end of the day. And yeah, I understand those people came in and probably tried to siege the Byzantine Empire. And I understand, like, as the Byzantine emperor, why you would want to punish them and send a message and send them back to where they came from. I get it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I understand the thought process of like, these guys are intruders trying to take my family, trying to take my kingdom, and I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to punish them and send them back to where they came from to send a message. I get it. I understand. Anyway, that was a silly rant. Next up, though, we have one that I was really looking forward to, which is the castor oil poop barrels. I don't know what this is exactly, but it's sounding like something that I would totally punish my enemies with.
Making someone drink a lot of castor oil caused stomach pain and made them so sick that they could no longer hold their poop together. They would then put the person in a big human-sized barrel and remove them when the person confessed. This could even go as far as leaving the person to drown in their own body fluids inside the barrel.
Wait, what? How long or how much do these people poop? Yo, that is insane. True story, I did clog my toilet this morning. Well, I don't want to go into detail, actually.
Disgusting!
Next up, we have the rack.
Person would be forced to lay on a rectangle-shaped wooden rack that stretched the victim's body by pulling the arms and legs in opposite directions.
Dope.
It caused incredible pain and could lead to dislocated limbs and torn ligaments. It was mainly used as a method to get information, but it could also be used to tear the victim's limbs out and leave him bleeding to death.
That one, I think, is not that... Okay, it's bad. I was gonna say it's not that bad. That's pretty bad. But I'm gonna be honest, dude. If I was strapped down, if they had me tied up in any sort of way and they were asking me questions, I'm just gonna tell them. I'll be honest. I'm just gonna tell them. Like, I'm not doing that. I don't care what it is. I'm yapping away. I'm gonna tell them everything I know about them. Next up, we have tarring and feathering. This one I've learned about in school, actually. I think that this was like an English and like American thing that was going on. Let's see.
Is a form of public torture where a victim is stripped naked or stripped to the waist, while wood tar, sometimes hot, is either poured or painted onto the person. After that, the victim would have feathers thrown onto him, or he was rolled around on a pile of feathers so that they stuck to the tar. This would not only cause extreme burns to the victim's skin, permanently scarring him, but also psychologically humiliate him in public, as he was meant to look like a giant chicken walking around the street.
Yeah, that was pretty common back in the I'm not sure what the era is called. When like, you know, like when like America was becoming America, like that time.
Was a metal tool that was
Pear.
put into someone's mouth or booty hole and then made bigger on purpose.
Okay, who came up with this one, bro? Ew, what am I looking at? I'm just gonna assume that's a mouth. I don't even want to think about anything else. Oh, I'm gonna throw up.
Tool would stretch the tissue to the point of no return.
I'm gonna throw up. I gotta move on. Aztecs, live heart removal.
Aztecs sacrificed people to Huitzilopochtli, the sun god. The victim would be placed on a sacrificial stone, and the priest would then cut through the abdomen with an obsidian or flint blade. The heart would be torn out, still beating, and held towards the sky in honor of the sun god.
Yeah, I mean, that's just insane. Like, at that point, that's a cult. I'm sorry, that's a cult. If your religion is saying you have to cut someone's heart, like, chest open, rip out the heart, and show it to the sun, like, bro, what? What are we talking about?
It's a collar with 2 sets of metal forks at each end. One set was placed under the chin and the other at the sternum, and the device was secured around the neck. This forced the victim to keep their head raised, leading to severe discomfort and sleep deprivation. The person would be asked questions or just be left there, while the fork slowly pierced through their neck
Oh
and
my
jaw,
God.
and this lasted until the victim could no longer hold their head raised, causing the fork to pierce through.
Oh, wait, do they die? Or like, oh my God. Nah, dude, that's just, oh God, that's so bad. Oh, that's really bad.
The Roman Emperor Nero involved tying a cup filled with hungry rats to the victim's stomach and then applying heat to the bottom, forcing the rats to burrow through the victim's body to escape. In some parts of South America, they used a variation of this method called the rectoscope, which
Oh my
consisted
God,
of inserting
nah.
living rats into a victim's rectum through
Oh
a
my
tube,
God.
forcing them to make their way
Oh
through
my
the victim's body
God.
to get out.
Oh my God. That's so messed up, man. Imagine dying that way. Oh God, I can't. God, I'm gonna like throw up, dude. I can't. I gotta move on. What is Catherine's wheel? Get me off of that one. I can't.
An execution method where the victim's limbs were tied to a large wheel and then struck with a hammer or iron bar, breaking their bones in multiple places. The wheel was placed on display later on, often leaving the victim to starve.
That one's, give me that one all day over the rat in my anus. Thank you very much.
The victim would be lowered into a large container with a boiling liquid, such as oil, gradually and slowly. The first
God.
exposed parts would be the extremities, such as fingers and toes, which have lots of nerve endings and cause incredible pain. Then the skin, muscles, and fat softened and liquefied due to the heat, while internal organs and the flesh got boiled from the outside, making this a slow and agonizing process. In another variation, which is thought to be even more painful and long, the victim would be lowered into a normal temperature liquid, which would be gradually heated.
Dude, people are crazy, man. I almost don't even want to associate my existence with these people's existence. I couldn't even ever imagine imagine sentencing someone to that. Today, like, at least in America, we have, like, executions if you're put on death row. Like, if you murder 20 people, then you get sentenced to death or whatever. But I believe the way that we do it today is, like, way more humane. Next up, we have keel holing. I think I've heard of this one, too.
Was a severe maritime punishment where a sailor was tied to a rope and dragged underwater from one side of the ship to the other, passing under the ship's keel. If the person did not drown or get vital damage from the rusty and sharp wooden body of the ship itself, they would just do it again until the person was no longer alive. It was feared for its brutality.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the worst. Is it the worst? Yeah, I'd say that's gotta be top 3. Not sure what my top 3 is anymore, but that's gotta be top 3.
As an execution method, the victim would be hanged upside down to make the blood flow to the head, increasing the time the person was conscious. The executioner would then divide the victim vertically
God.
into 2 halves,
Dude.
starting from the groin and
Oh
moving
my
upwards.
God. Oh, yeah, I don't even want to think about it. We're gonna move on. Oh my God.
This method wasn't always deadly, but in my opinion, it deserves this spot because of how brutally painful it sounds. It's the method of inserting a glass rod into a man's erect willy.
I don't even know what to say to that, all right? And now there's a hammer on my screen. No, don't hammer it in. That's painful enough.
Smashing it with a hammer, causing the glass rod to fragment.
I can't watch that. For all my fellas out there watching, which I believe is like 99% of people, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that we're gonna have to go through this together, but I'm gonna press play now. And I would like to apologize.
Into multiple small pieces that shattered all over the insides. Bamboo through booty hole.
Oh my God, man, it's not getting any better. Dude, don't tell me they start putting like little quarters and nickels in the end of the bamboo and it just funnels on in there. Then they can do like a piñata with them after.
A bamboo would be put inside a person's booty hole, and it would be left there. The bamboo would grow
Oh
really
my
quickly
God.
inside the man, causing incredible pain.
That's true. I'm pretty sure bamboo, like certain types of bamboo can grow like a foot a day. It might even be more. Some species of bamboo grow 35 to 36 inches in a day. That's 3 feet. For everyone who doesn't use the metric system, it's this.
It was sometimes left until it exited from the other side. Spanish donkey. This was a sharp-angled wooden device on which the victim was forced to sit, straddling it like a donkey, with weights attached to their feet. This would increase pressure and pain on the body, often causing severe injury to the legs and spine until the victim was ripped apart by their body weight.
I feel like that one, like once it starts ripping, it's not going to stop. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like once you get like the initial like rip of your booty crack or whatever's going on, you're just going to like, just like fall like a sack of potatoes and you're just going to just split open.
A real-sized bull was
awful.
used to lock someone inside and then heat it up with fire underneath. The person inside would feel extreme heat and pain while being burned alive, and it was meant to scare others by showing how bad the punishment could be. There were special pipes to make the victim breathe, which also made the screams hearable for the crowd, resulting in a bull-like sound. The steam would leave from the bull's nose for extra realism.
Yeah, the brazen bull's terrible, and I think that was used for like a very long time across many different cultures. Next up, we have impalement. That is a really scary image.
The brutal part of impaling, like crucifixion, is that the victim tortured himself. In a famous variant, he was set up high on a stake so that it didn't actually penetrate anything vital so long as he stayed up on his toes, so he could keep it from going any deeper so long as he kept his own weight on his feet. When the victim would get tired, he would slip a little further, and when he felt the pain, he would scramble up again on the already aching and exhausted muscles, only to repeat this process out of exhaustion a little later, and so on until something vital got pierced. Another variant consisted of the Judas chair.
What is up with all these people and sticking things in your butt? Has anyone else noticed like that pattern here? I feel like more than half of these, it's like, I'm gonna stick this in your butt until you die. Let's see how far this can go into your anus until you stop breathing. That's so crazy, man.
Featuring a pyramid-shaped
Like,
seat
look
where
at
the
this,
victim was
dude. What are we
placed at the
talking
top,
about?
with ropes used to lower and suspend their body weight.
These
onto
guys
the
are all
sharp apex.
freaky.
The chair would slowly rip the person apart.
Oh my God.
Flaying was a gruesome method where the skin was removed from the body while the victim was still alive.
Okay, I just don't even know like what if I could choose any of these, like what's worse, getting a booty stick in your booty and it just, or getting your skin ripped? Like, God, man. Why am I watching this? This is so silly. Why am I watching this?
This extreme form of torture was used to cause intense, slow pain and suffering, eventually leading to death through shock or infection. The skin, lacking major blood vessels, did not cause rapid blood loss, so victims could remain conscious and endure prolonged agony. It was often considered a meticulous process, requiring precision and skill from the executioner. And rather than removing the skin in pieces, cultures sought methods to flay the victim more efficiently and completely, sometimes using substances like boiling water to facilitate the process. Blood eagle.
Dope.
This one was a brutal ritual where the victim's ribs were cut from the spine and spread out to resemble wings, while the lungs were pulled through the openings, causing a slow, agonizing death.
Oh my
it's
God.
short, but it's one of the most brutal ones, in my opinion.
I'm pretty sure too, like back then they had to do tests on people to find what the worst thing was. Because, for example, that blood eagle thing, he said it didn't last that long, but I'm sure it lasted like a couple minutes. And that's long enough to be like really torturous and agonizing. All right, next up we have Ling Chi.
Also known as death by 1,000 cuts, it was a famous method used in China to prolong the suffering for as long as possible.
Do you see what I'm saying? That's literally exactly what I'm saying. This is the ultimate thing that I just said is Ling Chi.
For multiple variations of this method, even though almost all of them included cutting the skin deep enough to cause incredible pain, but not deep enough to allow the victim to lose blood. In one variation, the victim was restrained, and an executioner would pull knives out at random, each with a body part on it. Left forearm, right thigh, left foot, neck, etc. Each time he'd pull a knife out, he would make a cut on that body part. This would continue until the executioner pulled out the knife with the heart on it, and that's when he stabbed the victim through the heart. In another variation, they would tie a fishnet tightly around someone's body and cut off the pieces of skin that popped up in the holes of the net. In the most brutal version, they would bury someone up to their neck, make a cross-shaped cut at the crown of the head, peel the skin back, and pour mercury in the wound. The mercury, through its weight, would separate skin from flesh, and as the person struggled to unbury themselves, they would eventually leave their skin behind.
I'm like ashamed to be a human at this point, like knowing that our ancestor did this sort of stuff. And I'm sure there's places around the world that this stuff still happens. I believe it. How can humanity be so cruel? Like no other animal does stuff like that, by the way, at least that I know of. Like sure, they attack and kill and eat each other, but like they don't torture each other like this. That's insane. Like humans are actually crazy. But this is the last one. It's called scaphism. I don't even want to press play. I need a minute. All right, here we go.
This one is considered by many to be the worst execution method. In this punishment, the condemned person was placed inside a boat or between two boats, lying on their back with their arms and legs protruding through holes. They were force-fed large amounts of milk and honey, which induced severe diarrhea, and their entire body was smeared with the same mixture. This made them attractive to rodents, bugs, wasps, bees, flies, and whatever other animals lived near the lake. They would eat and bite at the victim's flesh, and when the next morning arrived, the boat would be brought back to the coast, and they would force-feed him another gigantic meal of milk and honey, also placing it on him once more. This was done on a daily basis to prolong the punishment for as long as possible. It was reported that the rats would usually try to go into the person's booty hole, and that the method was so
Awesome.
long that it seemed to have no end, with a person surviving 17 days. This person reportedly had his entire face completely covered with wasp, and his flesh was rotting away, filled with swarms of parasites and worms, all while being covered in his own
Oh my god,
filth.
dude.
If you want
Wow. That made me sick. I don't like it. I'd rather watch analog horror or like any of the other weird stuff that we watch here on the Reacts channel. But boys, if you enjoyed that and you do want to watch some other fun videos, make sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and click right here.